Hello and welcome to Crunch My Numbers. This is the show where we dive deep into strategies that drive business success. I'm your host, Paul Redmond, and today we're going to explore a topic that's crucial for many modern businesses, which is business systems architecture. I'm so happy today I'm going to be joined by one of my partners in the UK, Dan Daly. Dan heads up the UK version of RDA Accountants, and Dan is an expert in this area. But really, why is the topic so important? I suppose because we believe that business systems isn't just about financial management. It's about building a robust framework that supports every aspect of your business. That's where the business system architecture really came into play. And the concept of this started with when I was doing up my home at home during COVID, or just before COVID, where we decided we were going to do a renovation on my home. And I got an architect in and we looked at the whole plans and that as well. And I stepped back and I looked at this from the perspective of running a business and how does doing up your home become the same thing as running a business. And from the perspective of that, where it came out of was every now and then, your home needs to be renovated after a period of time and your business is exactly the same. So when you started and set up your business and you had business systems there, they're not necessarily applicable to what is applicable in today's world with a modern world. And Dan is really an expert, as I said earlier on, in this area. So I'm excited to have him here. And welcome to the show, Dan. And I suppose we start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Pleasure to be on this episode of your Crunch My Numbers podcast. And thank you for the introduction. As I guess then an intro to myself, I am an accountant now in practice. As Paul mentioned, partner over here in the UK for RDA Accountants. And to give a bit of background, prior to being back in practice, I had worked for some of the leading accounting software businesses in the UK. So that was for a period of about 4 years. So specialising in supporting accountants in practice and in turn their clients in the adoption of technology and solutions in the space of business, finance and accounting. What preceded that and what the bulk of my experience has been was 16 years as an accountant in practice. And through that time, I guess I took a fairly typical path of carrying out my studies whilst in working in practice. And I would say probably a pretty critical point in my journey came in 2011, 2012. And that was when we sort of had the dawn of online accounting software in the UK. And that was led by Xero accounting software, one of now a few different solutions to the market in that space. But what that created was, I guess, a drive towards a different way of working for accountants, and a different style of relationship was made possible between accountant and their clients. For me, it was great because it meant that I could combine my sort of, I guess, love, let's call it love of technology, and the working practice of accounting that I'd been through and studied for. So it meant I could combine the two. Now, it is definitely fair to say that in that period of time, and still fairly present today, that the adoption of technology by accountants is pretty juvenile in its state. Paul, I guess that would be fair to say.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit later on, but it is at its infancy.
Exactly, and it's a long time since what I've referenced there as the dawn, but there's still a lot of work to have opened up lots of possibilities of how accountants can work with their clients, but not all of, and in fact, not many at all of those possibilities have been properly explored and properly adopted by accountants as a way of adding value to their clients. So I guess where this intro, which has elongated beyond what I thought it might be, but where that gets us to is that I was able to move out of being your traditional client portfolio manager and senior accountant into a space where I could look at a much more specific added value service that we could provide to our clients, which at the time in our practice we coined as systems advisory. Pretty generic, and where that was compared to what we are now able to do at RDA in terms of where it's different is we were purely focused on the financial aspects of systems and only those that directly impacted or related to the services that we provided. So we're talking about the systems that allowed us to do our bookkeeping, systems that perhaps allowed us by extension to do management reporting, or systems that allowed us to support things like the statutory accounts and compliance work. But that's where it ended. And it's where, and Paul, your analogy is fantastic of the fact that you had to build a new house, and it's what led you to the coining the term of business architecture, because it's so true. And it allows us to think about how we can support businesses much wider than just the financial elements and components of what we're doing, which I think is where most accountants are. And it allows us to extend beyond that and think, how can we configure, architect a system that allows that business to thrive and optimize the way in which it can operate across operations and financials of the business. So I guess that's an extended intro, Paul, but hopefully that sheds some light.
It's fantastic because we can just see, and I have a long career in accounting as well, and in the IT side of the accounting, because that's what I grew up with as well, from writing up books and records on paper to transferring to the first version of a Concurrent DOS with the big floppy 5.25-inch floppy drives, and this journey is there, but the journey is evolving. But I suppose, first of all, could you kind of tell us what is business systems architecture and why is it so important today, really, in a modern world?
Yeah, so business systems architecture, I'll have my view on how we define that, and I guess there'll be variations of it. But what we're talking about, I guess let's consider a business as a vehicle or as a home. Both are analogies that will resonate with people. But what you're looking to do is create a structure and a framework through which operations and processes can pass in their optimal fashion. So to pass the analogy to a house, what you're wanting to do in a refurbishment or a build of a house is ensure it's got a framework in which the intended use of that thing is in its optimal fashion. So, the layout of the house, where things are, things like, energy efficiency elements of a house. And each of these things can be relatable to a business. A business is a vehicle through which you want to operate. And the framework of that business and the structure through which processes and operations take place need to be considered. And the architecture of that, and its link to systems architecture, is that you need to create these systems, the underlying processes, and with key consideration to the people whom will interact with those two elements as part of what that looks like in its optimum fashion. I think a big thing here is that this isn't necessarily something new. Businesses have had to have some sort of architecture in order to be optimal in the past, but it's now the opportunity that technology brings for us to just take that to the next level and ensure that it's dynamic in its creation. And I think that's a big piece here. It's business systems architecture in a fashion that allows dynamism for that business, because business moves fast, technology moves fast.
That's a brilliant kind of a way of collating the whole system. But I suppose to follow on from that, how does the business systems architecture differ from traditional IT management or business systems? And this is the point we're trying to get people to understand, that all of these things are relevant, but how does business systems architecture differ from that?
So I guess the difference here is the fact that it encompasses all of these different elements. So technology, IT is important, business operations are important, finances are important. All of those things, plus others, will determine and influence the success or not of that business. What we're talking about is the architecture of a system through which a business operates that considers all of those elements and more. And it allows for the most efficient and effective working of each of those different components. We devised an approach. Actually, this was back in my time in SaaS, so in software as a service, when I'd left practice and was working in the space of technology. We developed an approach of people process platform when we were considering systems. And that was to ensure that we always considered and took into account the impact and the influence of people that interact with any systems and business architecture, the processes that accompany any operations, both financial and ground operations, and then the platforms that are in play. And that it's absolutely essential that I almost see those as the three pillars of architecture to ensure that each of those things are present and correct to ensure that you've got the effective operation of that business.
And it not only, like, we as accountants ourselves need to do this, but this is relevant in every single business that operates in any area in the world. And this is the point that you had made to me on several occasions, that business systems architecture needs to be done for every single business that operates.
Every business. And I think probably how we found ourselves here, Paul, is as accountants, we have been trusted advisors to our clients, but there's been, I guess, limitations to how far accountants have been willing or able to broach into adding true, genuine value to the client relationship. And I think the dawn of the arrival and implementation of technology in accounting and finance has opened doors to us as trusted advisors to be able to impact our clients' businesses on a much broader level. And that's probably where we're at. And this is why this opportunity is here. And it is something that every business can benefit from, either, review, implementation, optimization of their business architecture.
So, like, if I was sitting down with a business owner, like, why should I prioritize this now more than ever? Why is this the right time to do it?
I would say now's the right time more than ever, because any day delayed is delaying, I guess, the journey towards a better business. And I'll reference the word dynamism again. What we're looking to ensure that is businesses can remain dynamic. So why today and why not tomorrow? Well, today there's opportunities there to refine, to optimize, or to implement, in some cases, a business architecture that lends itself to the most effective running of your business as an operation. And that is across, on the ground operations and finances. Benefits can be had from this type of effort immediately. So that's why today and not tomorrow, because every delaying the benefit.
And the ability to do it today compared to 3 years ago or 5 years ago means that the programs, the systemization, the structures are out there, and we're at the beginning of this AI revolution and blockchain technologies and everything that's coming down the line. So what we're trying to do is stop the overuse of trying to put all these things together, streamline the process, bring it back down to a basic hardcore version of a system that can grow. It doesn't matter how much the business grows then. Once you have the systems architecture in place, the business will grow with that. Would you agree with that?
I would massively agree. And there's a few really key points you've touched on there. Certainly the idea that technology keeps moving. So tomorrow, technology will have evolved from today. Something that I've certainly learned a hell of a lot from you in terms of, keeping abreast of what is changing. But the really important thing here is, and certainly it's another thing that you are right on top of, is technology moves, but you don't need to adopt every new bit of technology that's available. It's about understanding what's going to benefit the business. You mentioned about, I guess, on the concept of keeping it simple. Let's understand what the business needs. Let's get that basic framework in, the foundation, but ensure that we do it in such a way that we can evolve that in a dynamic fashion from that starting point. We can start to move on from that. This is our basic framework. This is our basic architecture. It allows us to do the basic principles of our business in an effective manner, but that we can build from that. And we can then continuously take advantage of technology that is relevant to our business and the improvement of our business systems, processes, and the interactions our people have with them.
Fantastic. So I suppose in understanding the business architecture, I have one more question for you. Like, what are the basic components of a business architecture system?
Yeah, so I would probably go back here to this idea of the three pillars of people, process, platform. And I would say that you shouldn't prioritize one over the other. But what I will say is that people are often missed in consideration when looking at business architecture. And to reinforce that point, I guess the way I'll tell the story is that I have seen fantastic platforms implemented, as system software implemented with really robust, detailed, to the nth degree processes. Fantastic. But without the buy-in and the education and the development of the people that need to use those processes and systems, that will fail. And I've seen that firsthand a number of times. So the basics of systems architecture, I would say those three pillars are a good guide, or variations of those things: people, process, platform. And I think they need to be considered across operations and finances. When I go back to this time in 2012 onwards, when we were looking at this systems advisory offering, the fact is all we looked at was financial transactions, the processing and the reporting of. An optimal business goes so far beyond that. And really the operations refined can drive a much better financial environment in which that business can then move forward.
It's like there's a story that an old gentleman told me one time about the three legs of a stool. It's if you have the three legs of the stool is very, very stable. But if you take one of the legs away, the stool is very, very unstable. And I suppose if you take the people out of that, you're going to lose the analogy. You're going to lose the strength of the overall system and the ability that it's going to continue into the future. The other thing I will say about that side of it is that a small to medium-sized business that takes this on at the very outset by the owners of the business and by the key drivers in the business have a massive competitive advantage because they can move fast. But could you imagine a large corporate, and I was listening to a podcast last night or a talk on implementing AI in large-scale businesses where there's no issue with the actual AI. And people think ChatGPT is the extent of AI. It's only one entry into the whole AI concept that's coming. But if you're trying to imagine to implement that into an organization that has 10,000 employees, again, if you don't get the people on board, that's what slows down implementation in a large scale. But on the other side, if you're a small and medium-sized business, you have a huge competitive advantage if you get this architecture right.
Yeah, exactly right. And that summary you've just given there, and the idea of, retrofitting technology to an established system, that again speaks volumes for the benefit of good systems, business systems architecture, because you do it in such a way that should you need to retrofit, it can be done efficiently and without disruption. Disruption's a huge, huge element of consideration when you're looking to retrofit any technology. So hugely important, again, really speaks to the value of good business systems architecture.
So I suppose now we've looked at, what is business systems architecture, but if I ask a question around the role of business in streamlining operations, so what does a well-implemented business system, how does it help to streamline operations within a company?
Yeah, so this I guess is where we come to, we've created the architecture. And I maybe, to put this against another analogy, if you're talking about a framework or an infrastructure, something like a travel infrastructure, a train network. We're talking about now, we've set the architecture of that network in such a way that the thing that it's carrying can be carried through efficiently regardless of volume. So trains on a train network, what we're talking about is both operational and financial data within a business being able to travel through that infrastructure efficiently. And we want to do that without regard to volume, because we want to be able to grow without being hindered by that structure that's put in place. So what we've allowed, by understanding the mechanics of the business and the trajectory of growth that's desired, we've instilled and implemented across people, process, platform, an infrastructure that can bear an increase of volume of data. Data can take many forms. We talk about data now, and it's considered to be something that's only new. Data's only existed since the internet arrived in its digital form. But data's been here forever, because if you've got a quill and a bit of ink and you put something on a bit of paper, that in itself is data. So data's always been here. It now can exist in vast, vast volumes. And by ensuring that we've got this good business systems architecture, you allow for the processing of vast volumes of data in a fashion that allows at the other end for that information and data to be used as intended. And that might be for business insights, it might be for regulatory submissions of data. And by doing it in such a way, you're ensuring, and this I live by, the definition of good data is that it's timely, it's accurate, and it's reliable. And that's how I would respond.
So give me an example of a common bottleneck that can be resolved by good systems.
Yeah, so common bottleneck, let's just go, I guess, right down to the basic end of what we experience, which is bookkeeping or data processing. Now, the importance of bookkeeping within an entity for ensuring you've got the accurate, reliable, timely financial data is huge. You cannot underestimate it. And historically, with volume came increased burden of time. So the more data there was to process, the more time you had to spend in order to process it. But what we're saying now is that with the ability to process data at volume through an effective and efficient systems architecture, you can remove that bottleneck that appears through an increased volume of data, and you can allow the focus on more processed data, the removal of the necessity for that low-end manual burden work. That then opens you up for the added value, effort, and really the true value that you can then provide to your clients.
So how does automation then play a role in business systems architecture? What's the benefit of automation?
Yeah, so automation, I guess, let's talk about things, repetitive tasks, I guess is as basic as you can get. Any repetitive task that exists, and again, let's relate it to bookkeeping, that you have to carry out on a regular basis, that can be replaced by ensuring that you instill automation technology. That can be as simple as, look, we've got these transactions that always take the same form. They are always processed, analysed and presented in the same fashion. And you can implement technology that therefore deals with that automatically.
So if I'm an accountant on the other side and I'm auditing a system that has an automated task and I test the automation and I ensure that the automation is working in place, then it gives me a lot more, it helps me make a comment about the books and records, for instance, or it helps me make a comment about, is this thing in place and is it working properly? So again, the role of this systems architecture, we're only talking about the very tip of the iceberg here, but it's really, this role is cannot be underestimated in terms of what we're trying to achieve longer term for a business. I'm going to talk a little bit now about scalability and growth within a business systems architecture. So how can a good system support a company's scalability and growth?
Yeah, so this is something that we've come across a lot, Paul, you and I certainly come across a lot in my previous stint in practice. But the truth is, I wasn't well enough equipped to understand what solutions were available to manage this issue. But every business, let's talk aside from business system architecture, every business goes through a business cycle. It goes through stages of business. At each of those stages come with various different challenges and hurdles that have to be overcome. The growth and the scaling stages of those cycles can be particularly difficult. They can cost money and they can be really to the huge detriment of the success of that business. And I know that you'll be able to talk more about that. But I guess then to link that to what does good business systems architecture mean for scale? What it means is that from the outset, you have factored in and considered the architecture of that business system to allow for that scale, whether that be volume, whether that be diversification, you have considered for it. And it is either inbuilt into it so that it can deal with that phase of the business cycle, or it is dynamic enough and agile enough to be able to move with it in such a fashion that it is not to the detriment of its success.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one there because of there is the 4 stages of a business, which is, as we talk about them a lot, which is startup, grow, scale and harvest. And each of those stages come with its own issues and opportunities and risks and everything. So setting a business up at the start with a proper business structure in place can have a significant improvement and a significant competitive advantage because you can do that. And we'll talk a bit more about that when we're looking at this, talking about decision making. But I suppose really for me, give us an example of how a successfully scaled, business is so robust with this system architecture. Can you pick an example out of your head there now of
Yeah, so I guess without broaching too much into a subject I know we'll cover, which will be, insights, business decision making. The point is that what we want as business owners is to have a business vehicle which is running on ordinary course of business effectively and without great manual burden, that provides us with sufficient insight output for us to be able to strategically manage our business going forwards. And I'll reference the concept of being able to look forward. For business owners, foresight and anticipation of both opportunities and challenges is absolutely critical in the successful operation of their business. By having our robust systems architecture that deals with the processing of volume, it ensures that we've got financial compliance, we've got accuracy, reliability, and timeliness of our data being processed. We free up our business owners, our clients, to be able to look forwards, anticipate, and recognize opportunity and challenges. Now, when it comes to the scaling stage, that means we're ahead of the game in some of these challenges that might arise, and equally opportunities. Often when we talk about things like this, foresight forecasting, we're talking about, God, where are the pitfalls? But the truth is, good business systems architecture also allows us to identify opportunities, and opportunities are much more positive in nature. And this opportunity might be, look, we can accelerate our scaling process because we are confident in the fact that we've got this system in place that allows every day to continue and is robust, resilient to increase in volume that comes with scale. So that's where I would pitch it.
And it really gives the owner this comfort and this reliability factor that you can say, well, I'm okay to do this. But like years ago, the requirement for this type of a business system wasn't there because the expectation level and the knowledge level that people had were that we looked a lot backwards. We looked a lot historically data and we processed the historical data, and the requirements for that were different than they are today. But just people's expectation today of deliverable of a value, they don't want to wait for months to take information. And they want to be able to do this. And this is coming up in the next angle, which is talking about enhancing data and decision making. But the power of having a system in place allows all of this, just opens up so much opportunity for people. And people's expectation levels are that they can go online and get an answer to any question in the world now. So they want to be able to do the same with everything else. And we have to speed up. We have to be more reliable. We have to have a better structure. And you can't do that if you have a fragmented system that doesn't talk to each other and you don't know the benefit of the information that you're getting from it. So I suppose with enhancing data management and decision making, how does it improve data management within a company, this system architecture?
Yeah, so I guess it's the idea of that we've got a structured, compartmentalized, but harmonized area in which our data exists. So to simplify what I'm talking about there, businesses, the data that we're talking about managing and processing effectively and efficiently through this system, businesses have always had this, but often, and you mentioned the word, and it's exactly bang on, it's the fragmentation of that data that makes it absolutely impossible as a business owner to use that to any great effect in the furtherance of their business. If we can bring that data into a structured environment through which it's processed effectively and you've got reliable, timely, accurate data that exists within that environment, the business owner can access either by, a really good way that we're doing this now is through our dashboards, business insights on dashboards that play to the points of data that business owners need. And it allows them it's the reliance and the comfort that the basics of processing are taking place so they can rely upon and make decisions on the data that can then be serviced as a result of it. So you can access the detail if you need it. It's compartmentalized in its relevant place, it's reliable, it's accurate, it's timely. But that gives you the foundation from which you can then surface the key metrics that as a business owner allow you to further the business.
So I suppose on a negative side, what are the risks of poor data management and how the business architecture can migrate the risk of poor data management?
Yeah, so Good point. And you need to reference it, because if it's not done well, you will experience all the opposite of these benefits and the advantages that we've referenced. If we do not have, let's go Armageddon here. If we don't have accurate data that we're using for the purpose of driving our business forward, and then the regulatory aspects of financial reporting and submissions, then we are potentially falling foul of our compliance requirements. We're not committing to and achieving our regulatory needs. And equally, the success of our business is dependent upon those numbers that are being used for the strategic decision making. So, I mentioned Armageddon. It sounds pretty dramatic, but the truth of it is, with inaccurate data, the disadvantages are vast.
Well, when you move from a startup to a grow, to a scale, to the harvest, every time you step on a bridge going from one to the other, there's a whole new set of issues and opportunities come at you. But once you have the system in place to help you transcend from one side to the other, it really makes a difference. So, and you breached on this thing about, analytics and business intelligence, and that plays a massive role with a good system in place.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we'll likely get to a part where we talk about it more, but part of my time in the world of SaaS, software as a service, working with software companies that provided software technology to the accounting industry, a large part of my focus was within a company that provided forecasting software. So I'm passionate about it. Talks about this shifting the lens from retro to proactive, ensuring that accountants can sit alongside their clients as trusted advisors, looking forwards rather than looking back. Now, that's not to say there isn't a need for retrospective financial compliance. Of course, you need to file your accounts, but if you can predominantly work with your clients on a basis of looking forwards, then the value you can add them is monumental in comparison, I would say. So a foundation of good forecasting, whether it be operational or financial forecasting, is sound, reliable, real-time data. And that is what you achieve through this good systems architecture, whereby data is processed efficiently, you've got good real-time information, it's accurate, it's timely, it's reliable, and you are then, from a sound base, you can start to look forward to your client. And, those cycles, just to touch on them again, the business cycles, startup, growth, scale, harvest, the more you can anticipate the arrival of those sections, and they don't, they're not a click of a finger, but they are a window in time, the much better prepared you are to advise and support your clients through those transitions.
But the client themselves have the benefit. And like we even seen, and I suppose the main benefit and the most operational benefit we've seen is doing this for ourselves in our own business.
Yeah.
We can talk about everybody else's, but in our own business, the access to data, decision-making, information now, it's light years ahead of where we were 2 to 3 years ago. So that's why we're so passionate about this. I do believe, when you put this in place, your life does become a lot different, because you're able to understand cash flow cycles a lot better. And you're not changing, like historically when we were doing forecasting and projections and that, we applied a percentage on last year's and look at the analysis and you made your best judgment guess on this. But the information wasn't the ability to go deep into the analytics of the information and the ability to zone straight down and say, well, you can segment not just a business, but a section of the business and a section of the section of the business. And the information is correct. And our clients love that, because they're able to take that information and make a decision, yes or no, to grow or scale or pull back or whatever they want, or everything is okay. And often it's just a business owner that has experience will know themselves whether the business is going well or not without you telling them. I've never yet met a business owner that really didn't understand that, well, I'm a bit tight, I'm okay, I'm growing, I'm a bit slack, I'd like another bit of work. But adding this whole extra layer of good, productive information on top of that makes them go, yeah, well, now I really know I have it. And now my shoulders can stand back a little, push back a little bit more, and I can drive forward a little bit more. So I suppose the next area we need to look at, there's only 2 more areas really, but the next one we kind of need to look at, or we want to look at, is, and it's a misconception, but it's the cost saving through optimized systems. Like there's a number of areas. So how can optimizing business systems lead to significant cost savings, even though there's a significant cost or there's a potential cost to doing this up front. So where do you lead to the cost savings?
Yeah, so I guess I would start here by right off the bat referencing and talking about the exercise and the effort of business systems architecture as an investment rather than a cost. And that is because of its enduring value. And I won't personally waver from that because the value it brings over time is huge and the return on that investment continues over time and increases if done correctly. So that's the way I would consider this right off the bat as an exercise. Now, the way that return on investment provides itself is twofold. It is firstly by, if done correctly, a reduction in overall costs because of the efficiencies of the process and the manual burden of people interaction with processes that are non-chargeable admin in nature. Depending upon the nature of your business, that will vary. But if you provide people with good systems that do not cause friction with the objectives trying to be achieved, then less time ultimately should be spent on them. If you produce systems architecture that facilitates the adoption of automation, then again, you remove manual burden for processing of transactions, etc. And then the second piece to this, if you're creating an environment which your business can thrive, grow, and scale, then that system is in turn, indirectly, sometimes directly allowing you to expand your revenue, potentially your margins, and ultimately your bottom line. And so that is the return of the investment of good business systems architecture.
So you're trying to balance the initial investment with the long-term saving really is what one of the main core tenets of a business systems architecture.
That's exactly it. And I appreciate sometimes being able to fully quantify that can be difficult, but it's possible. And so sometimes we'll have conversations with our clients and there's actually some pretty simple early basic wins that more than offset that original investment. And that's enough to, get your mind over the line to the value of the exercise.
But people, when they're looking at costs in this, they usually look at the financial cost, but not the people cost. And more than the financial and the people cost, there's hidden costs that are reduced, is that the energy cost yourself in trying to get information as a business owner and the energy you use trying to worry about something that, is there a problem here? And a lot of the times there's no problem, but just having the confidence in your own system. And I suppose for me, the easiest way to reduce the costs is the earlier you put the business system in. So what I mean by that is in the 4 stages, if you put this in place at the start, the cost is relatively negligible. But if you're trying to put this in, like if you're building a home from the very start, it's a lot cheaper when you're starting to build from a fresh ground and you have your new plan in place. If you're going in and trying to do up the house after a number of years, I can tell you from my own experience, a lot more expensive because you're in a way tearing down what's already there. That was brilliant and very apt and exactly what you needed at the time it was implemented. But it's not adaptable. So that the system has to be adaptable to change. And that's one of the main things that we put here. Like we could not do this, 5 years ago because the systems didn't talk to one another. As well as that. So it's an evolvement of what we already had, but it evolves because the technology allows us to evolve this system. And what we're trying to do now is just get in now when we can do it and start the process and get it done. So I suppose really, so there's some hidden costs in business operation that can be uncovered and reduced through the business systems architecture. Can you comment on that?
I can, yes. So this is often something that bears out partway through the process, but equally as part of the scoping element of a business systems architecture exercise, you may equally uncover costs that are not to the benefit or are to the detriment of the efficiency of the business operation. That's just by the very nature of what you're doing. You're reviewing all of the processes, you're reviewing the associated costs, and you're trying to streamline it. You want your business to be as streamlined as possible, and as part of the architecture of a system, that's part of what you're reviewing. Now, I'd say that one of the biggest costs, or let's go with probably the 2 biggest costs, because from my experience, there are 2. there are both software systems costs and people costs on efforts that are not to the advantage or to the furtherance of the business. They're probably the two main areas. Now, that's not to say that you're cutting people from your operation. It's to say that you're utilising the resource of those people in a more effective manner for the furtherance of your business.
Okay.
And that's the two areas I'd say that we most commonly see that there's immediate opportunity for refinement.
Well, I always felt in my own business that I have an incredibly talented and well-educated team of people here that are not used to their potential because they're doing tasks that are, with due respect of the word menial, they're doing tasks where they're inputting information. And when you take them away from that and let them do what they're really qualified to do, they will amaze you. They will absolutely blow your mind what they can actually do. So it's about enhancing the tools that somebody have to do their job a lot better. Now, and that is down to something that I spoke to somebody recently about. They were in the construction trade. They went out. They were able to give a quote to a person on their iPad or their phone in front of the person, hand the quote to them, email it to them then and there, get a letter of instruction back that it was okay to go ahead with the work. When the work was done, they're able to produce an invoice on the spot to the person, get paid on the spot through a link on their phone, and the money is in the bank account. Now, this person told me that, 6 months before he implemented this system, that this was the biggest bottleneck he had in the business. He hated the thoughts of, doing a course. But just imagine the ability that, and, he wasn't that IT savvy, but he was well able to use a phone. I said, sure, if you can use a phone, you can use anything. So we sat down, we done a little bit of training, showed him tap, 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 put the thing in place and said, this is worth any money to me because it just declutters my brain and allows me to do something that it's not my area of expertise, but I need to have that bit of information that I can actually go and say, yeah, well, I'm confident enough I can do this now. And you get your brand on it and it looks really cool and you're competing with all the massive big guys that are out there or big companies that are out there. You can easily compete and be a lot more speedy, active, and a lot more progressive. So they're the type of hidden costs that are there. So I suppose really the last stage of this thing, and we could talk literally about this all day long. There's no question. You and I have talked about this all day long.
Yeah, we have.
But what sets RDA accountants apart in the field of this business systems architecture? Like what sets us apart? And
yeah, I think, do you know what? This is a good question because it's one I've thought on. And I think the truth for me is that I had a particular set of experience, set of skills, and a really big thing for me was that I had a really deep interest in technology. And that combined with my experience in practice and my accounting qualification married up to become something that provided us with an opportunity at a point in time that was right. But that wasn't everything. And that's why now the combination of you and I, Paul, I think this is where it is. And it's your business acumen that has helped my sort of evolution into this space and the ability of the RDA to come at this with a rounded perspective of what makes good business systems architecture, combining, I guess, technology, accounting and finance, and business. And that business piece is so often missed, but is absolutely critical. It's everything. It's everything that we're doing for our business. And we bring, let's reference it, let's call it our triple threat, technology, accounting, and business.
yeah, I like that triple threat. It's another, again, the three legs on the one stool.
Yeah, true.
You're really doing that. So, and I mean, there's other people out there doing that. We're not just talking about ourselves, but we have both of us have a passion for this as well. And we can see the strategic innovations that are coming and this financial innovation that's going on at the moment. And it's just getting ahead of that to help people with it. But why is it important to work with partners like us and other people out there doing that? Like it's critical for your business.
Yeah, so quite often what we'll see is, there's a cost involved in this stuff. So often there can be a reluctance. I would again reference the idea that this type of work should be framed as an investment rather than cost. You're investing in the future success of your business. And the value goes far beyond just the original cost of acquiring a service. In terms of why you should partner with people, is because people do the things best that they're good at and that they're interested in. If everybody's stuck to what they're good at and you partner with the relevant people, then you can create yourself a lovely network of everybody doing what they want to do, what they do well, and to the benefit of each of the individuals, the corporates involved in that network. And that's how we operate.
So I suppose, what's the final piece of advice you have for companies who are looking to do this or optimize their system for future success?
Yeah, so I would say I'd love to reference this because I think it's important. There's a couple of things you've mentioned throughout, and we've sort of made the point that business actually is quite simple and can often be overcomplicated. You want to sell as much as you can with as little cost incurred as possible, and you want to receive money for your sales as quickly as possible. There's lots of stuff that sits underneath that, but approach this stuff in a fashion that can be simplified. Engage a partner, like RDA or others who can advise accordingly, and move forward with confidence and comfort in the fact that you do not need to be a static business. You can set yourself up with the ability for growth and scale in a fashion that doesn't need huge investment down the line.
Well, I think that's a great place to end this podcast. And I'd like to thank you for your enthusiasm, for your energy, and for your knowledge. I do think people will get it. I think it's an old method, but it's just wrapped under a new concept. We call this business architecture, but it's the same thing. It's just getting the system in place to do the thing that you want to do. So thank you so much. And I look forward to doing many more of these podcasts with you. Thanks, Dan.
Pleasure. Thanks, Paul.